I'm determined on this channel not to just show you things that are going well, because that's not the reality when you're gardening a lot of the time. So this is one of those videos where I'm going to show you something about an issue that I've been having, and it's with my apricot tree. So let's go take a look. So this is what I'm dealing with right here with this apricot tree, Gummosis. Gummosis is just this oozing of sap that happens on a lot of different trees. A lot of different fruit trees, especially stone fruit trees, tend to have this problem. So that's the first thing to know about Gummosis, is that there's no need to panic. Often you don't need to do anything at all, but it does help to know what's causing it, because sometimes you might need to intervene. So that's what I'm going to do in this video, is take a look at what I'm dealing with this tree and see if there's anything that I need to do to try to fix it, prevent it from getting worse. Another thing to know about Gummosis is that it is common in stone fruit trees, but it's also the fact that Gummosis is a symptom. It's not a problem in itself. It's not a disease itself. So just like when we are sick, we might get a fever, or if you hurt yourself, you're bleeding, you know, a fever is not a disease, but it's a symptom that your body is going through something and is trying to fix something. The thing to do is to try to find the underlying cause, so we know if we just need to let it run its course, let the tree recover on its own, or if we need to intervene in some way. So I'm going to do that by just observing a few different things. I've got some simple tools here that are going to help me, so let's take a little bit closer look at what we're dealing with. Okay, so I've got a few different spots on this tree that I've noticed the Gummosis. And so the first thing I want to do is just take a closer look at all of them. So this is the first one. This is the main place I've seen it. So some of the things you want to look out for are, what's the color of the ooze? How big is the spot? You want to look and see, is there any visible like sawdust or other kind of debris inside the ooze, insect frass, right? Insect droppings basically, because that'll give you a clue about if it's an insect problem. What kind of size is it? Is it just coming from a small hole? Is it sort of just oozing generally? Is it covering a bigger spot? And is there sort of like a sunken spot? And does the bark underneath look damaged? And then we're actually going to scrape this away and take a look at the bark underneath and see what it looks like. See if it looks healthy or problematic in some way. And actually, if we look down here at the base of the tree, this is a little bit worrisome, seeing the stuff oozing down here at the bottom. Now, I do think most of this is what has dripped from above, but I want to be sure. And I can see some darker ooze there, so I want to make sure that there's not a problem here at the bottom of the tree. Here's another spot over here. So one of the problems this could be is if the tree is planted too deep, or if the mulch has gotten piled up too high, you might see this kind of oozing at the base of the tree. So that's what I want to double check. So let's see what we can figure out. All right, I'm just gonna carefully kind of scrape away. Ugh, it's such a weird, it's so gummy. It's such a weird texture. So make sure if you're doing this that you have somewhere to kind of put the ooze, because if there is an insect problem, you don't want it to spread. So this is the first thing I wanted to check with that oozy spot. I just very carefully scraped away with a sanitized knife the outer layer of bark, and you can see underneath it, it looks nice and pale and even colored. That looks healthy. From what I can tell, if it was dark or splotchy or more brownish, I would be concerned that it was maybe a fungal disease or something like that. But this looks healthy, which makes me think it's something else that's causing this. I also want to look down here at the base of the tree and see what is ooze that has fallen and what is still coming out of the tree. So I'm just gonna, I've got this giant screwdriver, I'm just gonna kind of scoop all this up. Yeah, this is just fallen here, I can tell. There's a lot of moisture trapped here. So yeah, look, there's some oozing down here. So this is a spot I want to keep an eye on, but I wonder if this has been buried a little too deep. Okay, so this is another trouble spot I've been watching, and what's concerning about this is how dark it is. So that first spot I showed you, the sap was really light and clear, and I think it was just stress on the tree. But sometimes when it turns dark like this, that's an indication that something is going on. Now, I will say I don't see any bits of sawdust or bark or bugs or anything like that. I don't think this is an insect problem. My suspicion is that this is a bacterial or fungal disease. We will see if we can figure out what it is, but first I want to scrape this away and see what's going on underneath. Apparently, one of the ways that you can tell whether it's a bacterial disease, if it's bacterial canker, is by smelling it. If the ooze smells kind of sour, and I've even seen it described as smelling like beer, then that's a sign that it's a bacterial problem rather than a fungal problem. So I'm gonna go give this a sniff. Okay, so that was really interesting. I did the smell test and I can confirm there is a distinct sort of sour, fermenty smell to this spot that I was looking at. So let's kind of back up and recap a little bit. I said there are a lot of things that this could be. Let's talk about some of them. For one thing, gummosis often happens when there's just an injury to the tree. So it could be an animal nibbling on the bark. It could be damage from a machine, with like a lawnmower or a tractor or a weed whacker or something that damages the bark and leaves a wound. Could be from pruning, actually. If you prune at the wrong time of year, especially if it's damp, that can cause problems. But especially if you're pruning with dull equipment, so that you're leaving a rough cut, all of this can stress the tree and it could weep sap from pruning wounds. Another thing it could be is sun scald. So sun scald happens in the winter when the sun shines strongly during the day and warms up the bark, and then the temperature drops really low at night, and then that can cause the tissue to kind of swell and go down and the bark to split. So it's possible that there could be some past sun scald damage. It's November right now. We have not had any cold weather yet, so I know it's not current, but it could have happened in the past and left wounds, and I'm just seeing the results of that. Another thing it could be is just some sort of environmental stress. So specifically, I'm thinking about water stress. It often, an apricot tree or a stone fruit tree will often start to show those signs of gummosis, the oozing, when it's waterlogged, when it's sitting in really soggy soil. If you have drainage issues, that's just a sign of the tree stressing out and wanting to kind of get rid of some of that excess moisture. But it also could happen in dry patches, especially if you have sandy soil. And that is something I definitely have. I have really sandy soil. In general, I have found that this tree loves my really well-draining soil, and it generally does well in dry spells. But we had a really long patch, probably 2 to 3 months of pretty hot weather and absolutely no precipitation of any kind. And that was when I started noticing this happening. So I think that's a big reason of why I'm seeing this now. I think my tree was stressed out. It wasn't showing major signs of drought stress. I didn't notice any wilting of the leaves or anything like that, but it could have been stressed out by the lack of irrigation. And that is kind of confirmed for me because since then, in the last 2 to 3 weeks, we've had a ton of rain. And I do feel like that I've seen less of the oozing and the tree just seems a little happier in general. So I do think that was part of my problem. But the real concern I have is those spots that were kind of like the darker oozing spots, and where I showed you that the bark was darker underneath and looked discolored. And especially when I smelled that one spot and definitely smelled that sort of fermenty, sour smell. So that is a sign of bacterial canker. And I am also kind of thinking that that's likely because we had a really warm and really mild, very wet spring. So this could have been a problem all season, and I'm just seeing it now because of that drought stress, because of the stress the tree's under. Because any time that you see stress or that a tree is under stress, it's gonna tell you. Somehow it's gonna have wilting leaves, it's gonna ooze goo, it's gonna do something to tell you that it's stressed out. And so I think that's what's happening. But I have noticed a couple signs. It was a big problem on my peach trees this year. But even as I'm looking around at the apricot leaves, those telltale signs of bacterial spot or bacterial canker is they're like some little brown spots on the leaves. And sometimes what you'll see, it's called shot hole, which just looks like little holes in the leaves, which can look like insect damage also. But I think also with these other things I'm seeing, I think it's likely that that's my problem. Another really common problem for apricot trees, though, is a fungal canker called cytospora canker. And that one's a little bit different. It tends to be a big problem on the trunk of the tree. It also tends to be over bigger patches. You'll see almost like a sunken area from what I read. I have not experienced this yet. Let me just put that caveat out there. I'm not an actual expert in apricot diseases, but I have done a ton of research. So the fungal problem tends to be over a bigger area. It'll look dark, and it'll kind of, when you peel away the ooze, it has that darkened bark underneath. That's similar. Doesn't have the sour smell. And it also tends to cause certain parts of the tree to die back. So often everything above that spot will die. And I don't have any dead areas on my tree. So that's what makes me think it's stress, water stress, which hopefully has passed, and a bacterial problem. So the question is now, what do I do about it? So I want to do what I need to do to take care of my tree now, but I really want to focus on preventing that stress and preventing this from happening, hopefully, in the future to the best of my ability. So for right now, the best thing I'm going to do is clean away those gummy spots like I've been doing, scraping away the gummosis and a little bit of that top bark, and then sealing the wound with something. So what I'm going to use is here's what I'm going to use, this IV Organics 3-in-1 Plant Guard. So I'm all about trying the least invasive, organic, everything natural options first and seeing if that's enough. And since this doesn't seem to be a huge problem yet, hopefully that'll be enough to take care of it, along with alleviating the water stress on the tree. So this is great. It's a bunch of just natural ingredients that work together to prevent all kinds of problems. It helps prevent sun scald, which is perfect because we're getting into winter soon, even though it's really warm. It will protect against rodent damage. It's got things that rodents do not like to taste. It also has some antifungal and antibacterial ingredients like garlic, cinnamon, cloves, mint, rosemary, things like that have those antifungal and antibacterial properties. So my hope is by painting this directly on the wounds that this will help prevent the spread and keep it from getting any worse. I obviously want to solve this problem now, but I think the more important thing is to think about long-term care for this tree and what I can do to prevent this in the future. Basically, if there's any sort of environmental stress, you want to take care of that first. Another thing is sanitization practices, so sanitizing your pruning equipment. And you can bet this year when I prune, I'm going to be sanitizing between every single cut because I don't want to run the risk of spreading anything throughout the tree. But part of that also is cleaning up around the tree, especially this time of year in fall. If it is bacterial spot, that disease can overwinter in the debris under the tree. And in general, leaves are great for soil health. Let them break down over the winter. But if you've got a disease issue, you're better off cleaning up underneath the tree and using other things to enhance the soil. Other than that, I'm going to be diligent about spraying with copper this fall. A copper fungicide can work really well to prevent various fungal and bacterial diseases, and you really want to concentrate on that in the fall when the leaves first fall off the tree to try to just get rid of anything right then and there. And then sometimes you do it multiple times throughout the winter. So I'm gonna make a plan and be really diligent about following that spray schedule this winter. So that's it. It's interesting. What I thought the problem was, it turns out it might have been something else. I thought it was just the stress from the drought and then the water, but when I took a closer look, there was an actual issue that I needed to address. And that just goes to show that repeat observation of your garden, of your fruit trees, is the best thing that you can do to just spot any issues before they become a big problem. And I'm not gonna lie to you, owning fruit trees is work. It's not hard, but it's not always simple. And I just want to encourage you to, if you have an issue, don't give up, don't despair. ask around. There's so many great groups and forums. You can comment, you can message me through thefruitgrove.com if you have questions. I'd be happy to help if I'm able. But you know, that's part of the process, is learning and seeking out answers. So let me know in the comments first if you have any questions, but I also want to know, what's your experience with gummosis with your fruit trees, especially stone fruit trees? What have you found that works? What are some good tips and tricks that you have? Share them all. Let's get a good discussion going. But thank you so much for joining me today. I will keep you updated on how my apricot tree does, and I will see you in the next video.